little more, or is this?
You can, yeah.
So we are live, and we are here tonight with Bill W D Kilpack III, author of 7 novels and some exciting other things going on with his work that we'll get into. Bill, how are you doing tonight, or afternoon for you, I guess?
Did he lose us? Did he not hear us already?
I'm doing well.
Okay.
Well. I sorry I had I had both links clicked. I'm sorry about that.
All right.
Echo going on.
That happens.
But I was a little excited, so I was watching us while watching us, and I'm doing well. That I really enjoy. I really enjoy this. That meeting other authors and being on podcasts. That's some of the stuff that is kind of the it's kind of that's the gravy. That being able to do this and I love meeting readers and reviewers and all that. Meeting the people involved is the extra stuff that I didn't realize I would enjoy as much as I do. And so right now, it just kind of gives me an extra little bump up. I'm a little more fired up than my average for the day.
That's always a good thing. How many of these do you do generally?
I do as many as I can. They tend to come in spurts that, and they tend to come without. They tend to come by surprise. That sometimes I've had the most I've had is 3 in 1 week, and it happened where someone contacted me and said, "You want to do one?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then they talked to somebody, and all of a sudden I got 2 more invitations, and it just so happened that all of them wanted to do it immediately. And so I had 3 in 1 week, and so that's the most I've ever had. But I mean, I'll do as many as I can. That I've done. There was one that I was the very first guest on one that the guy put out a notice saying that it's a new podcast and who'd like to be my first guest, and it was like crickets. Nobody responded, and I was like, "Well, that's lame." And so I said, "Sure, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll be your first." And then he was awesome, and I think.
So he's still going?
Yeah, he's still going, and
who is it?
It's called Shelf Builders, or is it Shelf Builders? I think it's called Shelf Builders. That he's an indie author, and he's in, I think it's Nova Scotia. But there was a woman who was from Africa. There's a couple that were from India. The woman from Africa was the very first one I ever did. And she gave me a script because of the language barrier and the accent. And then for half of the time, she went off script. And so it was my very first one. It was my first one on Zoom. And so I didn't like looking at myself. And so, and then she went off script. And so when she went off script, I was just really looking very intently because I was trying so hard to understand her. And now I've watched it enough times that there's some of them that I was nowhere near what she was saying. I was answering nowhere close to the question that she asked, but I just did the best I could. And then there's a guy from India that interviewed me twice, and the first time he gave me a script and stuck to it. And then the second time he said, "No script this time. I want to surprise you." And I was like, "Oh, great."
Yeah. Well, we're going to probably do the same thing, but at least we all speak the language, so it should be a little easier to get through there.
Yeah.
So, calling in from Utah, Mike, is this the first person we've had from Utah?
No, Caden Love.
All right. Okay. Second then.
Do you go to Dragonsteel?
What's that?
Go to Dragonsteel Comic-Con?
I didn't go. I knew about it, but I didn't know about it soon enough.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go. At FanX, they had a huge booth that was, I can't imagine how much that thing cost. It was just this, it was a castle. And I can't believe how quickly they got it set up and broken down either. It was impressive. I've done a lot of trade shows over the years. I've got a marketing background, a corporate marketing background, and I've been to shows where people have $1 million budgets for shows, and that was probably, in that caliber, what they had at FanX.
Do you, you ever do anything like that for your books?
I'd love to be able to do something like that for my books, but I don't have that kind of a budget, anything close.
Well, nobody has that kind of budget. I mean, just getting a table at like a Comic-Con or something. Have you ever done that?
Well, FanX, I've shared with some other people. This last FanX, this past September, was great. That there was a group of indie authors, that we got a mega booth, and that was really great. That was awesome. And we did a anthology that was an exclusive FanX release. And that mega booth, the space that we were in, the very first year I went to FanX, I met one of my inspirational authors in that exact same space.
Nice.
His name's SM Sterling, and I met him there, and I geeked out. I didn't know that I could do that. I used to do some acting. I've met famous people, and I never geeked out, but I did with him, and because he inspired me and influenced me as a writer. And so hey, Bards and Books.
It's in the house.
That is actually my favorite booktuber.
Oh, well, you're out. You're gone.
That is awesome.
So before we dive into the books a little bit, Bill, what do you do when you're not writing?
Well, now I'm writing full time.
Oh, nice. Okay. Is that a pretty recent development?
Well, with COVID, that
okay.
I taught college for 25 years. I worked in marketing for, well, I still do, but so I guess that's still running, but 30 plus years in marketing. And then I was coaching wrestling for 25 years. And when COVID happened, then I figured that there was no way that they could have a wrestling season. And I had been kind of suffering with a hip issue for 6 years. And I thought, well, there's not going to be a wrestling season. I'll schedule the hip surgery. And then they still had a wrestling season. And I decided, well, I can't in good conscience coach during COVID. That there's absolutely no way that you could prevent the spread of COVID in wrestling.
Right. Seems odd that they had wrestling of all the sports where, you were absolutely contacting other sweaty people.
Yeah.
Seems odd.
I mean, we couldn't prevent the spread of ringworm. How could we not prevent the spread of COVID? And so I just decided it was a sign, and I retired from coaching, got the hip surgery, and I also decided, well, that it's a sign. I'd been freelance writing since I was 15, and but I put my novels and everything on the back burner to raise a family, and so I decided it's a sign. It's time to publish my first book, and which was Crown Prince, and it was in pretty good shape, and I just polished and figured out how to do the layout and all that to work with Amazon to do that. And as a freelancer, I'd worked with enough publishers that I wasn't interested in going the traditional route. I'd had some stuff with publishers where they, hip surgery, and it was a great gift. And all my old injuries from all the years of wrestling, they were all coming back on me. So that was actually my 5th surgery in 10 years.
Mike, I think we need a bell or something. Like every time we have a first on the show, we can ring it, because I think Bill just gave us our first ever mention of ringworm on the show.
Yes,
something different for us.
Well, it's in the wrestling world, it's like, saying, something's red or blue. Ringworm is just one of those things that
Really?
happens. Yeah.
That's gross.
It's not that big a deal.
It
It
sounds like it would be.
it just itches, but it's contagious, and people who are out. Okay, wrestlers are their own breed. We're wrestlers are different species, and so, and it's not an actual worm. It's a rash. It's ringworms, but it's a rash. It's just one of those things, and it gets on the mats and then it spreads. The problem is that if you get it, then it can make it so that you can catch all kinds of other stuff that can be icky.
Okay.
So it's not a serious thing, but
All
it's
right.
just part of it.
So we're 11 minutes in. Now's a good time to actually maybe mention the fact that you do write books, and you have 7. You've got a little bit of sci-fi in there. We'll get to all that. But your latest is Vengeance Born, and it's book 5 of 8, which is that's an undertaking to start off saying I'm going to do 8. Of course, I said I was going to do 12, and it's only going to be 5 now. So what the hell do I know?
Well, the 8 books are already written. I sat down and I wrote them straight through. And this is let me see if I can get the glare off it. This is Vengeance Born, and it came out at the end of November. And it is book 5. It's a little bit of a fatty. It's the thickest one so far. Yep, ringworms are not little.
Tim was today years old. Look at that. Bald&Balding has taught someone something.
And so, and this one just recently was named a editor. It was I can't remember if it was a top pick or an editor's choice on Bookshelf. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, nice.
But I always send them information about my stuff, and so it got an award, which was kind of cool. So that one is is book 5. And should I show the other one since we're talking about it?
Well, before you do, how many words is book 5 there?
Oh, good question. I don't.
We get about 500-600 pages.
Yeah, it's 6. Well, counting the glossary, it's 611.
See, this is how they get you, Ro. He writes the shorter books to lure me in. I have my rule: I don't read books over 500 pages. So you'd lure me in with your first 4 books, and then I'd be stuck.
It's a dumbass rule, Mike. You know that.
Well, Bards and Books just named the New Blood Saga number 7 of his top 10 of all time.
Nice.
And that was super cool. And
all right, Bards and Books, you've got a chance here. Where does Mike or my series fit in your top 10 of all time?
Sorry, Usman, I put you on the spot.
No, that's all right. We know the answer. So
this one is Laurie,
you wrote 8 books of that size just straight through?
Well, they're not all this size. These 2 are fatties, but I wrote 8 of them all straight through. Demon Seed is thinner. Oh, they fell. Demon Seed is thinner than those. It's thinner.
It doesn't look it.
The other, it's 550.
Oh, right. Well then. Yeah.
And then Order of Light book 2 is quite a bit thinner. And then Crown Prince, which is book 1, is the smallest of them. And when I wrote them, there was places where I knew that I would be fleshing this out later, and so on and so forth, because I wanted to get it all out while it was flowing. And so I was just writing. I would write, and there were places where I just knew that I would come back to it. And so then as I got later, then a lot of those things I got to it then. And so then I would come back, and when I was revising them for publication, then they got thicker. And so when I got to Rilari, it got so thick that the paperback would cost as much as a hardcover. And so I took 4 chapters and moved them into Vengeance Born, which actually was good because the way that Rilari ended was a much better cliffhanger than the original cliffhanger. And so, and yes, that's actually my name, John H. Stevenson IV.
Yeah, right. Between the two of you, we've got like,
Yep.
you know, I don't
And
think we've ever had this many suffix numbers before.
and so I ended up then having to take, you know, the last few chapters of Vengeance Born and move them into the next book, for the same reason. It's a little longer than Rilari, but I just don't want a paperback to be cost prohibitive. And
Right.
so if it's getting to be more than a hardcover, then that's just not right, in my opinion. And so I bumped it. And so, you know, that's what I've done. And that's why I think that maybe book 8 might end up being part 1 and part 2, because that seems to keep happening. But if that's what needs to happen, that's what needs to happen. And
so what is, I mean, that's a lot of words. What's a writing session for you look like? I mean, now that you're writing as a full-time kind of gig, what is a day for you?
My constant companion is my laptop, and having some way to write has been the case with me since I was 15. That I always went then, you know, it was pre-laptop. Laptops didn't exist. I had a 3-ring binder that I carried around with lined paper in it so that I could write at any time. And I didn't see that as anything special or significant. It was just what I did. And because I'd have an idea and I had to write it down. But then after publishing my first novel, that summer or spring, that same year, we had a high school reunion, and all these people at the reunion saying, you finally published your first novel. Do you still have that 3-ring binder? It was like that. It was almost in the same breath.
So now wait a minute. As we bill ourselves as a Gen X show, I have to ask, tell the truth. Was that 3-ring binder in fact a Trapper Keeper?
No.
Oh, that's a shame.
If I never had a Trapper Keeper, that was too expensive.
Skeletal. Nice.
Yeah, my family didn't have a lot of money, so that was too much money for me. I admired people who had those, but
be stepping up to that level, huh?
yeah, the Trapper Keeper was super cool. Before, well,
And this answers the Jeopardy question: how sad were the '80s?
And the peak of coolness for the Trapper Keeper was before I was in high school, but the people that had those were people that had a lot of things that I admired.
So, are you a plotter or a pantser?
I don't outline my books. I'm a pantser. I have an idea of where I'm going.
You just roll through 1,000,000 words just off the back.
Well, I have an idea of where I'm going. I have milestones in mind, but the way I look at it is, if when I'm writing, I have a moment where as the writer, I go, wow, I didn't see that coming. Then the reader will definitely have that moment.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's what I want. I want the reader to have that moment, and I want the reader to have an emotional response.
Your characters do dumb shit to throw you off?
Do I what?
Do your characters do dumb stuff to throw you off?
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get angry with them. There are some of my characters, I read my stuff to my wife. Mm-hmm. We call that her bedtime stories. And some of my characters she hates. And I can just say the name of a character, specific characters, and she has a visceral, audible response.
That's good though, right? I mean, even if they hate them, that means that whatever you were trying to do, hopefully, worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, none of my characters are black and well, okay. The ultimate bad guy in the New Blood Saga, he's black and white. He's horrible. But everyone else is not black and white. And that's the way I like it, because that's real.
Right.
And that's how I describe my fantasy, is I describe it as realistic fantasy. That, you know, the magic in my world is not like fireworks going off. It's not like Harry Potter. And the magic I think is more subtle. And in the New Blood Saga, the word magic is never said.
Not once.
Not once.
Do you like keep like a show kind of diary thing, so you can go back and look up all that stuff? I mean, especially if you've written all of these at once. Did you find yourself going, what the hell was this person doing? Or, you know, so do you keep some type of, you know, book Bible that keeps all that tracked for you?
I have notes for every book. It's this shows you how old I am. It's a notepad. I have notes because I started doing web programming in Notepad.
You don't mean a paper notepad. You mean in Notepad.
In Notepad, yeah.
That's awful.
And because I started doing web programming in 1996, and that's like when it started, when it was a gray screen.
Yeah, but they had wine coolers in 1996 too, and you don't see people drinking those anymore.
I don't drink much anymore. I considered having a beer with you, but I'd have to go to the liquor store for it in Utah, because all I really like is like Guinness. And
well, that's all right.
You can't buy that at a grocery store.
Mike's probably drinking a freaking Dr. Pepper Zero or something.
Nothing tonight. There is no beverage for me.
Oh wow, look at you.
But I don't drink much anymore in my misspent youth, and so special occasions, then I'll have a good, you know, dark beer. If the beer is black and the foam is brown, then life is good.
All right, good deal. Mike, do you have anything, man?
I do.
I can keep going. I just, you know,
I want to actually ask you about your characters, because we should probably mention them at some point. Who is the main character for your series?
The main character is Nathar. He's the guardian of Merrick, and let's see, that's an image of him. Let's see if I can. And the guardian of Merrick is basically the guardian of mankind, and the guardian of Merrick can see into the future. He can see into the past. He has sight, and he was inspired. I thought of him when I was in college, and one of my majors in my undergrad was philosophy, and I was inspired by Socrates. And Socrates would have these moments where he would go into a trance-like state, and he called it being seized by the demon of philosophy, and Daemon. And he would come out of this trance with an epiphany, something profound. And so I wanted to have a character that was like that. And Socrates was also a war hero. He was a soldier. He's a war hero. And so that went along with it. I wanted to have a soldier that would have something like that. So Nathar, that was the kernel of the idea for Nathar. He is seized by the demon of sight. And so he can see the future. He can see the past. Sometimes he is seized to the point that he freezes in place. And so people that know him, when he's in that state, they tell other people, don't touch him. Because if you startle him, then he may not know what's real and what's not. And if it's bad, then that might be bad for you. Because he's like this ultimate soldier type. And he's a advisor to kings. And he was a war hero. And but so the Crown Prince literally starts with the birth of the Crown Prince, and Nathar is there waiting, and his dad was the guardian before him, and so they knew that the Crown Prince was going to be born. They knew that the royal family was going to be overthrown, and that it couldn't be stopped. And so he's there to take the Crown Prince and a wet nurse and flee. and they've spent decades in preparation. And so that's how it starts. And in book one, a lot of the time, especially in fantasy, you don't get to see this crown prince or chosen one kind of character grow up. And Nathar stays with them for 7 years. So you get to see him grow up. And I had 5 kids, so I can describe that. And my oldest boy was a handful. And so the crown prince is a handful. And
now, does he grow into his in a better, less annoying way than like Harry Potter grows into his? Or even Luke Skywalker, a less annoying Luke Skywalker?
He learns a lot of lessons from Nathar, yes. And well, and the thing is that when he's 7, then Nathar leaves. Because he neglected his duties as the guardian of Merrick. And after 7 years, he has to go back out of guilt and a sense of duty. He has to go back. And then things happen and he's gone. And so then in Order of Light, then it's jump ahead 8 years. He's 15 now. He's a man. And Nathar's been gone and stuff has happened. And the rest of the series is Nathar trying to get back to the Crown Prince and all the horrible things that can happen. And bad things do happen. And that's one thing all the categories and ways, I don't like all the categories, all the things that people do to say it's this or it's that.
Mm-hmm.
I just like saying it. I'm okay with epic fantasy, but then people say, well, I think it's dark. Well, okay. And then some people say,
I was going to ask you, that's what I was just scribbling down, is how far down that road do you go? I mean, do you kind of edge onto the horror or the grimdark, or?
I don't think, well, I'm not sure that it's grimdark. I'm not sure exactly where the lines are, but I would, there's definitely stuff that's dark. Rilari's dark. Book 4 gets into some stuff well, Bards and Books, he described it as there's a couple things in there that he said gave him a pretty good gut punch. And that's good. That because I've made myself laugh writing it. I've made myself cry writing it. And so I want those emotional responses. So there is stuff that I don't think that overall it's dark, but it has dark moments. And Rilari has darker than the others, but there's dark moments. There's real stuff. There's bad things happen. And one of the things with that I hope that the series teaches is that bad things can happen, but you can overcome. You can endure. You can, because that's how life is, that bad things happen to everybody, and you can suck it up and get over it. And you can work past it. You can fight. You can fight those demons. You can fight, whatever it might be. And suck it up. I don't want to trivialize it. That sounds trivializing, and that's not what I mean. But you can come back from these things and fight back. And that's one of the things that I hope that it does teach, because there are people that take serious hits and they gut it out.
So, question for you: what is your Crown Prince's name?
The Crown Prince's name is Vakari. However, because he's in hiding, they change it to Nathan.
So, if you've got all 8 of these books ready to go, you just released book 5. When did that come out?
That came out at the end of November.
Okay. So what's your release plan for 6, 7, 8?
I hope to get, well, the next one I hope to get out, well, it will come out this year. And that Usurper's Might will come out this year. And then I've also got book 2 of Battle Calm. The Battle Calm cycle is the next one coming out. I'm hoping to get 2 books out a year. But then I'm also writing the script for Paleface, which is in movie development. There's just,
We're going to get to that.
you know,
But
life
if you've got 6, 7, 8 done, well, I mean, are you just purposely making people wait a year, or
well,
is there more to do to them? Are they not quite ready for prime time?
well, the one thing is one thing I learned with Vengeance Born is that when I pushed those 4 chapters, to make those 4 chapters the beginning of the book takes some work to make them the beginning of a book, because every book, doesn't matter what it is, in my opinion, if it's regardless of it being a part of a series, every book should be able to stand on its own. And so to make those chapters that were the end of a book be the beginning of the book took rewriting, and to make that work. And so that was something that I didn't realize with Vengeance Born. And so Vengeance Born took me much longer to have ready than I expected. And so that was one thing that delayed Vengeance Born. About several things that delayed Vengeance Born about 6 months. That was one. Another was the screenwriting, but the rework was much more than I would have thought.
Yeah.
And because when I just plugged it in and worked it through, then it made the story uneven. It had this kind of peak, because then all of a sudden it's like the story is starting here, and it felt that way. And so I had to go back and rework that. And so that that required more rework and more reorchestrating those 4 chapters, and then the next probably 3 chapters than I expected it to. So that required just more work than I expected, and it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. But it's just one of those things that now with Usurper's Might, that now I know that's coming, and so I'm just figuring that by the end of the year, then I should be able to get that out. But I also, part of that is because I have book 2 of the Battle Calm cycle coming out soon. Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Bill, that Ro's going to go, really, Mike, again, but I like to ask this question.
I know what you're going to say.
I know you do. So you said you're from Jordan?
West Jordan.
West Jordan? Okay, so picture the main street of West Jordan. Now, would you rather be in a saddle riding a griffin over top of that street, or on the back of a T-Rex going down the street? Which one is – there's only one right answer, and Ro and I disagree. So,
everybody else disagrees with you too, man.
So which one would be cooler, T-Rex or griffin?
I'd rather be on the griffin.
You're wrong. Terrible. Not everyone. Timothy Wolf, because
18-1 if anybody's keeping score at home.
Tim will come to bat for me. Team T-Rex. There you go, because it's closer to a lizard.
Tim's one of the Canadian Tims, right?
No, that would be Tim McKay.
Oh, okay. I thought they were both Canadians.
Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't want to ride a T-Rex. But if you're making me choose between the two,
right?
And part of that is that a griffin can fly.
You still chose wrong.
It's all about the flying, man.
But the T-Rex, you could like pick up somebody's car and like toss it into a building. I mean,
okay. So you got that out of your system, man? You done?
Yes, thank you. That's my contribution. Now I can go back to just stare.
All right. So you've been talking about your 8-book fantasy series, and I want to get into something else. But you have a dystopian military that you just mentioned here a minute ago, the Battle Column series.
Yeah, this is book 1. This is Battle Calm. So if I can get the glare off it.
Okay.
And I wrote the first draft of this in 1984, and I watched the first 30 seconds of Terminator, turned it off, and started writing. And so this was handwritten, the very first draft, back then. And so, but then when I got serious about it, so I wrote the first draft, and then when I got serious about it, because it's military, I developed a new branch of the military for it. They're called the Keepers. And I interviewed military vets to do that, to flesh it out, which was actually one of the coolest things I've ever done. There's some stories I wish I'd never heard, but because it was also really, really hard, some of those things I was told. But one of the most gratifying things that I've had is that I've had military vets who have read it now who asked me, how long did you serve? And I didn't. And so that is one of the coolest compliments I've had. And I've got a new cover that I don't have yet that has a review from a woman who was a special agent in the U.S. Army CID, and where she gave it a 5-star review. And when I told her about interviewing, military vets for it, her response was, I could feel it. And so I guess I did my job. And so the main character's name is Badger. He's the greatest soldier alive. One of the reasons I point out I wrote the first draft in 1984 is that her name is Trinity. And you don't want to mess with her because she will take you out. And
for the Matrix.
Yeah, and it's was it 15 years before the Matrix? Yeah. But it's a dystopian world, and the world has been at war so long that no one remembers a time that it wasn't. And it's a trilogy, and the first book is, in essence, is coming to the conclusion of, are we all that's left? And
how many books are going to be in that series?
3.
Okay, and one of them's book 2 is coming out this year?
Yep, book 2 is coming out soon. I'm almost finished with the revisions. That one is more of a rewrite in terms of the revisions. But because the last time I did any work on it, I'm a much better writer now than then. Yeah. And so I'd done some rework. I mean, of course, the first time I did it was when I was 14 years old. And so that the first version of the book, and then I've done rewrites on it a couple times since then. And then of course this was with doing the research and all that, and I realized at one point that if I did this as one book, it'd be 1,000 pages, so it needs to be broken down. And then with breaking it down, then again I had to rework on book 2, so it is the beginning of a book, and all that again.
Yep.
But that one is pretty exciting, and something that I'm pretty happy with. And but again, it's there is one fight scene in it that came from one of those interviews, and it is it's very intense and fairly graphic, and I won't say what it is, but it's something that was described to me in detail, and the person who told me about it told me, use this. This is real, use this. And any vet who was in it will know. And so I did. And
yeah, excellent. Now, the last one you have is a novella called Paleface.
Yep.
And that is something going on with that one that you mentioned to us, and I think we get to ring the first time bell again, because what's happening with this novella right now?
Paleface is in movie development.
Nice.
And I wrote this for the L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future contest, which has a word limit, which is why it's that thick. because the original draft probably would have been about that thick.
Right.
But it was handwritten because I didn't have a computer at the time. And then I typed it in school when I was in college. And that was the first time I saw how many words it was. And then I went, oh crap, because it was substantially too long. And so to make this eligible, I had to cut massive amounts. And what was submitted was the word limit. I was literally saying, if I replace these 3 words with this 1 word, then I'm down 2 more words. And so this is present day sci-fi. It starts in 2012, and the chapters in it have dates on them because they jump back and forth through time. There's flashbacks and stuff. And the final date is the day that I submitted it for publication, December 3rd, 2021. And I updated it for COVID. And it's the story of Hector Whitehorse, who is a Navajo. And one reviewer described it as X-Files on an Indian reservation. And when I wrote this was several years before there were X-Files. But Hector Whitehorse is raised on the Rama Indian Reservation in New Mexico, and he has what I call a interplanetary traffic accident. He gets hit by a UFO. And so he is the proof of alien life. He would not have survived without their intervention, and his body is the proof. And so he's a very private person, and he no longer gets to be private. And
so how, as an indie author, then, did this make its way into somebody who's in the movie development business?
You're not going to believe it. LinkedIn.
I won't believe
it. The production company, it's an indie production company. First of all, if it was a big production company, I wouldn't be writing the screenplay. They'd have somebody in their corral doing it. And so there was another project that they needed a writer for. And he found me on LinkedIn and sent me a message that the president of the company that said something to the effect of, I'd like to have a conversation with you. Can you call me tomorrow at this time? And his phone number. And I looked him up, and when he was an actor, he did enough stuff that in the 80s and 90s, my wife and I recognized him because he was always that other cop or that other Italian mobster. And so we were like, hey, it's that guy. And so I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I called him, and he told me about this other project, and I signed all kinds of NDAs. I've never seen anything quite like it. And then I wrote a pilot, and he sent me all kinds of stuff to do that, that he would see graphics or get an idea and send himself an email with a sentence or a paragraph. He sent all these things to me, 30, 40 emails, and I literally assembled them like a puzzle. And then I wrote a pilot, and he gave me 6 weeks, and 9 days later, I sent him a first draft. And that's how I am. I crank. But so I wrote 24 episodes of this miniseries, and that was the first thing. And then with the strike and the other things going on in Hollywood, and it being a small new company, then getting investors for that, everybody was like, do you have anything smaller? and he knew about my other books. He had all of them, and so then he said, "What would it take for you to write a script for this? Because this is smaller. This could be a much smaller budget, a one-time thing, and then that would take away that objection, because saying anything smaller, that's what it comes down to, is nobody wanted to be first. So that big, huge project then got bumped for this smaller project. So that's
how long has all this been going on?
I wrote the 24 episodes in a year.
But I mean with Paleface.
And then Paleface has been going on for about a year. And again, the movie industry right now is in turmoil.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially indies, they kind of move at a glacial pace. Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm told is that the way this is moving is like light speed compared to normal. There are actors who have been approached and have expressed interest, but there's something called a pay-or-play agreement where they have to be paid and sign a contract and stuff to even use their name. So there's some names that are people that I'm very excited about, but without that, then I can't disclose it because of NDA stuff.
So what can you tell us?
One actor who, after reading 3 scenes from the screenplay, but he was also, this is shocking, was aware of my work. Is an actor named Michael Horse. And he's on the list of the top 25 most influential Native American actors in history. And have you seen Twin Peaks?
I have not.
No.
Okay, that's like the most popular thing. He was the sheriff on Twin Peaks. But the very first thing he did was back in 1980, he was Tonto in The Lone Ranger they did in 1980. And but he's done a lot of stuff. Now he's in his 70s. And he's been cast as the grandfather. And he, most recently, he was on, what's that TV series? Do you remember? The Witches, Salem.
Oh, Charmed?
No. It was Salem. So I can't remember. And he was on the Call of the Wild with Harrison Ford. Anyway, he's done loads and loads of stuff over his career. But after reading the 3 scenes and stuff, he said that he has to be part of this. And he said, use my name. He did an interview to try and help in the fundraising efforts. And
so where does all that stand right now? I mean, what kind of goal are they trying to get to before they can actually start getting people together and,
we're trying to we're in the fundraising process. One is that the first hurdle is getting all the funds, which is a lot, to get all of the legal crap, which is a staggering amount of stuff for all the legal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've got it's like 1 page of notes of all the legal stuff that is required. Now I'm not a novice at that stuff. I've dealt with a lot of that, but there's a lot of this for the movies that is just is stuff I've never heard of. And but there's a lot of legal stuff, and part of that is getting the pay-or-play contracts. And because a lot of the stuff with some of these actors are big enough names that getting the pay-or-play, which then you pay them for the pay-or-play, once they're there, then investors will say, "Oh, you got that person? I'm in."
Yeah.
And
kind of a bowfinger kind of a situation.
And it's all this cart before the horse, but sometimes you have to have the cart before the horse. That's the way that the business works, and some of it to me just makes no sense, but it's the way it's done. And some of the movies that if you've seen movies about making movies and some of the crazy things they do, it's real. There's a guy that's a legitimate rock star. I've seen him in concert, and they know him, and so they had him get together his band and play a birthday party for a rich guy.
So they're having you do the screenplay for this?
So I'm writing the screenplay. I've written the second draft now. And
how much different is that than just writing the story itself?
The cool thing with that is that all the stuff that I had to cut is going back in.
Nice.
And that is awesome. Oh, there's the first limited edition poster behind me.
Excellent. Yeah.
And so there's a consultant. We have a Navajo advisor for me, and he is he's a medicine man. And when he read this first, and then he asked me how long I lived on the res. That was the first thing he asked me. So again, I guess I do good research. And then he's been going on, and the stuff going back in, it just so happens, I said it on the Rama Reservation. When I wrote the story, I wanted to have something about an alien encounter. And I want it to be present day when I was deciding to write the story. So it had to be in New Mexico. I wanted to have a Native American character. And I'm part Cherokee, but there's not a Cherokee reservation in New Mexico. And I've driven through the northern edge of the Rama Reservation. That's how it got put there.
You knew it existed there.
Yep, I knew it existed. And then when I started doing research and stuff, then there's a bunch of things there that are pretty cool. And it just so happens that the guy that is the advisor is from there. The high school / middle school, the principal there is his cousin. He knows all these people that are on the reservation. All this stuff is, this guy, it knows it like the back of his hand, aside from the culture. And one of the things also is that I have a little bit of Navajo in it. Not a lot, just a little bit. But Navajo is probably the hardest language in the world. And when Michael Horst found out that there's a little bit of Navajo in it, his first response was, "I have to speak Navajo? Do you know how hard that is?" And it's like, just a little. Well, one of the things is that there are websites out there that tell you Navajo words and stuff. This means this. Probably 95% of them are bogus. Because so few people speak it. Who's going to catch them?
Right, yeah.
So I have all this stuff, all this research. See, my research here was done in books. It's pretty solid. The research on the screenplay is on the internet. So with the consultant, he's very careful to be very sweet and not offend me. But in essence, it's always, where'd you get that?
Yeah. One last question for you then, before we let you go back to your day. How much say do you get as the author into any other kind of portion of that? I mean, does your agreement say that you have a voice in any other kind of making of this thing?
Yeah, I get a lot. That there was a casting meeting, for example, and it was on Zoom, and they asked me to just set it up because I have a Zoom account, and so I did, and sent it out, and I sent him the link, and I expected, then he sent it out. I figured. Who was on the meeting? the director, and me. And it was, what did you have in mind when you did this? When you wrote this? When you wrote this character? Who were you envisioning? What did you imagine when you did this? That's what it was. Mm-hmm. And then he did a movie teaser that, first of all, it's amazing. But there's things in it that I did not tell him that I hadn't written the screenplay yet that are not in this. But they're things that I imagined, and they're in it. And that to me is amazing that he was able to do that from that meeting and other meetings we've had, but they're things that I never said. And he was able to make those connections, and those connections with me, but I have a lot of influence and a lot of control. Now, he also keeps reminding me that when you make a movie, there's 3 scripts. There's the one you write, then there's the one that they shoot from, and then there's the one that gets in the final cut.
Right.
And he reminds me of that regularly.
So what's the, I mean, what are they telling you is the kind of timeline of this best case scenario for it being released, or time where they say, okay, this just won't ever happen?
We were hoping to start shooting in this spring, but there were some financial goals that didn't get met. And so now it's probably, now they're saying hopefully in fall that to start shooting. But basically playing it by ear. The one thing, another thing is the fires in California. That's in Hollywood land. Yep. For example, one of the guys that is a producer with the production company, his house was burned to the ground. He lost everything, and he's one of the producers with the production company. So, and that the fires out there affected the whole industry, because so there's a lot of stuff going on. And a lot of people who, were some of the kind of the most flamboyant, I mean, dare I say, arrogant people in the world that throw money around left and right prior to COVID and then prior to the strikes, are now holding their money very close to the chest and are being unbelievably conservative. And then now we got this with the fires, and and a lot of this, it's just, I can't blame anybody for being cautious, with that stuff. And the writer's strike definitely was warranted. It was needed, and the writers won, and that was good because it was necessary. But do you know why the writer's strike?
That's further back than my brain cells go.
Well, the studios were having AI write scripts.
Oh yeah, freaking AI.
And they were crap. So then they get a writer to fix it. Well, the writer doesn't get a byline, and then they get paid 10% of what they would have been paid for writing the script.
Because they didn't actually write it. They just,
they fixed it.
Yeah.
And so, that was worth striking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because it was devastating. And there were writers that were losing their guild membership over it because they weren't working enough. So they had no insurance, aside from taking some of them, like it literally was like a 90% pay cut.
That's crazy.
And
California is not the place to take any kind of pay cut.
Yeah. So, the writer's strike, I can't address the actor strike, but the writer's strike was needed.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bill, you want to hold up your books one more time? You've got
we got Crown Prince.
And your latest one, Vengeance.
Yep. Crown Prince is book 1 of the New Blood saga.
New Blood, okay.
Vengeance Born is book 5. How do I do it? The glare.
Yep.
Battle Calm is book 1 of the trilogy, the Battle Calm cycle. Paleface is the one that is in movie development. And since I've got them here, I'll go ahead and Order of Light is book 2. Demon Seed is book 3. And Rilari is book 4. And these things have won 26 book awards.
Nice.
Which
That's awesome.
is just humbling.
Yeah. And book 5 of the series will be out later this year. And
yes, definitely by the end of the year.
And book 2 of your sci-fi series, the follow-up to Battle Calm, will be out sometime this year as well.
Yes, that will be out hopefully in the next month, if not the next 2 months.
Okay. And there is Bill's website. Go take a look at that. Bunch of fun stuff in there.
The videos page has the movie trailer. It has other interviews. It's got book trailers. It's got fun stuff. I'll have a link to this to it. It will be there.
Awesome.
Right.
So we'll be famous.
Yep.
About time.
and I already did a huge push for this, and I'm going to do more. I try to pay it. Pay everything back. I try to pay everything back. People help me. I try to give it back.
All right.
Just the only request is when Paleface comes out and it gets unanimous praise from everywhere, just do a cryptic Bald&Balding made this happen, and then say nothing else, and just let them come try to find us. See if they can turn over the rocks to find us. That's all it is.
It'll be an Easter egg.
There you go. All right, Bill, thank you very much. And thanks everybody who joined us tonight. And what do we got next, Mike?
Thursday night, we have Dr. Fantasy himself, Philip Chase, will be on our show.
All right, Thursday. So nothing tomorrow. We'll see y'all again Thursday.
Yep.
Thanks,
He
Bill.
did a great review of Crown Prince for me.
Did he?
All
Awesome.
right, excellent.
Okay.
Well, I'll wave awkwardly.
Yep.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for